and welcome to the Sohbet Podcast, the podcast formerly known as Breakfast Punx. My name's Siobhan.
And I'm Dave. And Sohbet means the spiritual discussion between friends. Here we mean spiritual with an extremely small s. We're basically talking about anything that creates meaning, anything that is made by human beings, not computers.
Good point.
That's probably quite an important part. We don't really know.
No.
If you want to find out exactly what it's about, you might want to go back to our last episode, which is episode 63, when we were still called Breakfast Punx. And we tried to describe exactly what we're going to be discussing on this podcast.
It was a little bit meta because whilst trying to describe what this podcast is about, I think we were also at the same time working out what the podcast was about in real time.
And if it's not obvious, we're still sort of working it out.
I think it's a work in progress. But I think that's kind of the point. The point is to keep having discussions, to encourage growth, change, discovery, or just, I don't know, thoughtful talk. It's not coming off very thoughtful or obvious now, but we'd like to think that that's something we always did, and now we're going to be emphasising the importance of those discussions, especially in a world where maybe it can feel a little bit overwhelming or lack of meaning and connection amongst ourselves.
Indeed. Basically, what we want to talk about is all that is important to us, and hopefully you, the listener, will gain some sort of understanding of why those things are important. Last week we talked a little bit about the idea of how the things that we put into our brains create us as people. This is an idea that I think that we're probably going to talk an awful lot about over the course of this podcast, however long it may last.
Yeah.
And so at the beginning of the episodes, we're just going to do one little bit. We're not going to have a lot of bits in this podcast, not like before when we had all sorts of different bits
and
with
theme
tunes and everything. This is going to be somewhat more relaxed and, as we said last time, unedited.
Yes.
So what you get is what you get.
I mean, just very quickly before we get on to that, speaking of theme tunes, those who have listened before will notice that our music has also changed.
Yeah, I hope your heart sank in the way that I intended them to. I should say we had very limited options as to what we could pick. Basically, it was just whatever shit music Dave has created on his own in his bedroom over the course of the last 20 years.
Yeah.
That doesn't have any singing on it.
Yeah.
Turns out when I write songs, most of them just involve loads of singing on
Immediate
like
singing. 2 bars straight into some singing.
There's not a lot of sort of instrumental outros.
No, there is not.
So we had a choice between that and something that sounded a little bit like
an 80s nude broadcast. Nude broadcast? Not a nude broadcast.
80s nude broadcast. That's not what I initially thought.
News broadcast, not a porno.
I don't think it sounded like a news broadcast. I'm going to have to jump to my own defence a little bit.
It was something.
I mean, it was a small section from a synth pop musical that I wrote about 12 years ago. Which never saw the light of day and never will.
It should.
And I believe that the section, it was a dystopian synth musical, I should say. I believe that the section that we were going to use was where the humans all had all realised that it was more or less a rip-off of Brave New World, I should say. The humans all realised that they were being kept by their overlords and not being able to see the real world, which was outside the bubble that they all lived in.
But that's the whole point of this podcast, in a way.
I know, but because out of context, it did sound a little bit like, I thought a bit like Gangster's Paradise.
It did not.
But you refuse to acknowledge that it did.
It did not sound like Gangster's Paradise.
I mean, it did, ladies and gentlemen. You'll never hear it, so I'm just going to say that it definitely did, 100%. It was probably equal and as good as Gangster's Paradise by Coolio, and I'm very proud of it.
I so wanted to play a bit of it now to be like, audience, have we made the wrong choice or have we done the right thing? But you're not going to allow that because I know that if anyone else heard it, they would not agree that it was Gangster's Paradise. It is good, it's lovely.
I hold the keys to that kingdom, course. And so therefore it will not.
One day the whole episode will just be the full musical and all of the songs Just play one after the other.
No, because you'd have to read the script in between all the songs.
Will you be reading the script in between the songs? We could do it for a few hours.
Well, there's only 4 characters in it. There's two.
Easy,
there's
I'll do
2 fellas, 2 ladies.
All
so
right.
we could easily do it. You'd have to probably because in the recordings, in the demo recordings that I made. The lady parts were just sung by me doing a high voice.
Oh my god!
So
do you know what? I've heard bits of this, but I've never actually heard the scripted bits or like the vocals.
Well, again, I mean, considering no one's going to hear it, I can assure you all, it was one of the greatest musicals ever made. It was certainly the greatest synth pop dystopian opera.
Yeah, that you've ever made.
That I've ever made. So no, and probably ever will make. I mean, I think we can say that.
I think that's fair to say
with some absolute certainty.
It's probably like one of one, really good.
But I think importantly, the reason why, and I think maybe I pushed a little bit hard. I don't think you were too bothered about which one we chose, but I pushed a little bit harder for the theme tune that you ended up hearing just a few moments ago.
Yes, the Acoustic Joys,
because it was actually created by a human. I was an animal banging my flesh against metal strings. And
please be specific that it was you.
It was my hand flesh.
Just not the description that one usually uses for playing guitar.
Well,
bashing my flesh.
Well, no, my animal flesh, yes, was being used in order to create that. So I thought, considering. Well, I think I don't know, we didn't talk about this last week and we haven't talked about this a great deal, but I do sort of think that we are very keen to concentrate on, as I said, things created by human beings.
Yeah. In
a world where increasingly things are created by computers and AI and what have you. I don't have any huge conspiracies about AI. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. No. We're not going to be going on about it. No, but we all know that those things are affecting our lives in a lot of ways.
And I guess losing the human connection that we should all have, being the social animals we are.
Indeed.
And if we are only communicating with computers, as we kind of are now, but never mind. We're doing the most human thing you can do, having a conversation.
Yeah.
Put down some electrics. That's fine.
Well, yeah, and I think also, the amount that electrical doings are sort of entering into music. We went to see Bryan Adams live in Margate a couple of days ago, and I don't
Sorry, everyone who's ever listened to this before has been like, God, those guys, they used to play like DIY punk on their podcast and have really weird and interesting stuff. And then we come at you with, by the way, we're now going to be a bit like spiritual with a small s, but also we did talk a lot about religion last week. So we're losing everyone. And then we're coming in hard with, now we've been to see Bryan Adams in Margate with all the norms. Not going to lie, it was amazing. And
it was very good.
No regrets.
It was very good. But the support artist, who was described as, what were the exact words?
The breath of fresh air that the punk scene needed. Yeah. Kerrang's words.
I'm not going to bother mentioning their name because I don't really have any interest in being mean about anybody. And also this person, I mean, what does it fucking matter? I mean, this person's clearly very successful, but or I assume, but what came out was, an utterly empty performance, half created by a computer, with some incredibly awful graphics also created on what appeared to be Paint 98. But I think that was deliberate because I suppose that's what's cool now.
Yeah.
And the whole thing just felt extraordinarily cold to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, the point being that, music created by, I'm going to say it again, 3, 4, 5, however many, 10 people with their flesh banging their instruments is very important to me and I think to us.
Yes.
And I think that, even within the little punk scene that we're in, whilst for the most part, I think it hasn't really affected us a great deal, backing tracks are slipping in. People are creating half of their live show using a fucking computer.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It's none of my business. I'm just going to sound like an old man.
That's fine.
But
I feel like this like ultra Luddite of you will just come through every now and then. It's all good.
Yeah.
But it's not to be dismissive or rude. It's just I get why.
But our theme tune is somebody playing a guitar.
Yes, it is. Well summed up.
The end.
Anyway, sorry for that distraction from the theme tune. Back to what you were trying to say.
So we talked last week about how important it is as to what you put into your brain in order to decide on what ends up coming out of your brain. We're going to talk about this idea an awful lot. It comes in with another sort of concept of like, be careful who you pretend to be, because you are who you pretend to be.
Oh, I love that.
Which we will discuss at great length, I'm sure. But we thought we would start off every episode with each of us picking one thing which we've put into our heads, which hopefully is creating some sort of positivity coming out of our mouths or keyboards or bodies.
Yeah.
This can be anything. Obviously, as we've just talked about music for a while, it can be something musical, it can be a book, it can be just an experience, it can be an idea. It's very loose, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, it is.
Very loose.
As everything is.
Indeed. As the first 10 minutes of this episode will have proven to you. If you're listening for the first time, I'm sorry. So, Siobhan, what have you put into your head in the recent past, which is influencing you to be a more spiritual being?
Oh, gosh. Do you know what? With all that, I've thought of another one. So am I allowed to?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
This is your podcast. You do what you want.
Yeah, I don't know.
10 if you want.
Sir, may I have more? Which is, that's not a quote. So one of them, just when you talk about music, and I hope I'm not stealing one from you because you were there too.
You are not.
Good. The other gig we've been to, I mean, June has been a very strange month for gigs for us. And in the same 10 days, we saw Bryan Adams and we also saw Tool, which I think, very comparable. And without going into it too much, obviously the show was amazing and ridiculously good and probably the most proficient thing I've ever seen. But the singer, I want to say his name is Maynard.
Maynard James Keenan.
That's it. Maynard, what a name. Was really clear at the beginning. And I think, I've never been to see Tool before, but I think this is now what they do every show, is before they play, there's a lot of over the tannoy messages saying, please do not use any cameras or get your phones out. You will be ejected. And you just think, oh, that's a bit strong. And then he comes out and he does say, he's like, this is a magical experience. This is something we're all here to be in, and to be fully present in this, do not get your phone out. Like, if you can't live without your phone for this time, you have something seriously wrong with you. And it was just really refreshing to see the entire of this arena completely devoid of the phones, which were now, I didn't realise until you see an arena with none, just how much they are all there when people are like taking photos and videoing things, as we did then see at Bryan Adams when I couldn't see anything because people's arms were in the air filming.
Bryan Adams was insane in that context. I mean, this is something that I think fundamentally, particularly when an old man like me starts moaning about it, you immediately think, oh, this is an old boy complaining about like 18-year-olds. Clearly at Bryan Adams there may have been one 18-year-old, but for the vast majority of people were considerably older than us.
Yeah.
And they were fucking men. I mean, there was times where I swear at least half the place just had their phones in the air, filming nothing, taking photos of nothing. You couldn't see. I mean, it's fine. Bryan Adams isn't exactly a picture, so it's fine not to have to see him.
Oh, I mean, that's not fair at all.
No, it's maybe not fair.
Not fair at all. He's quite a picture.
But anyway, yeah, it was insane at Bryan Adams.
It was, but so to have the Tool experience, which was, I mean, the music is like this kind of weird, enchanting, rumbling along thing that you do kind of feel a bit hypnotized with. So of all the things to not be distracted by, you wouldn't want to get your phones out and do it. So I just thought it was really good, really interesting. Someone did actually get ejected for it, so I like that they held true to it as well.
But I feel like you found out that someone got ejected through social media.
Probably. No, it was through, I think it was through like a review.
One way or the other, you looked that up on your phone.
Yeah, no, of course. So it is atrocious.
There's an irony there.
But it was really good. It was just a really nice reminder and just really like cool to see it all. But that wasn't going to be my one. What my one was going to be, and still is because I'm still listening to this conversation, is I have the Waking Up app, which is by someone called Sam Harris, who is we've mentioned it before, he's a cognitive scientist who has a big interest in meditation, and his is a spirituality without religious beliefs specifically, and he's written a lot of books about he's quite anti-religion for various reasons. But on this podcast, he is very good at interviewing other people and their experiences. And yeah, recently I've listened to a conversation he's had with a lady called Joan Tollefson, who I'd never heard of before. I don't think there's any reason to have heard of her, but the nice thing about this podcast is it brings together loads of people that you've just never heard of. And she has a background in Buddhism, in that kind of Hinduism that I can't think of the name of, that begins with A, which is very similar spiritually to Buddhism in that respect, and Zen. She's done all these kind of like things, but she doesn't seem particularly affiliated with any. And she was just super refreshing. I don't know if any of those listening have tried to look into Buddhism and look into specifically Zen. It's all really prescriptive and really, it kind of makes it a bit, whilst it's a spiritual guide for everyone, it's meant to be very open, it's still got a lot of jargon and difficulties to it that, you know, the path to enlightenment is one you have to try out and all this other stuff that makes it really inaccessible unless you do all these specific things and follow a leader as such. And she just came in with loads of arguments to Sam and really clear in her way of just everything is already exactly how it should be and just pay attention to that. And any question he had, yeah, but what do you tell people that are striving for this, striving for that, and have been taught for many years by a teacher, like, what's the point of them doing that? And she was like, I don't care and I don't know. You just have to do your own thing and just be so happy with it. And she was just really, I don't know, just really anti-teacher, really anti, like, dogma in that respect. And it was just for someone who's been trying to, like, think about Buddhism and think about, like, this eightfold path and all these other, like, specific
suffering
and, like, people saying what things mean. Like, a lot of these teachings are open to a lot of interpretation, and that's the idea of all these different teachers, and everyone will say they're right, and she's just like, they're all right and they're all wrong, and it absolutely doesn't matter. And it was just really refreshing to hear someone like that who is in her 80s, has been a drunk, has been, I don't know, lived through the 60s, so did everything then, and it's just been like, wouldn't trade any of it. You learn from all of these experiences and just so happy with life because it is exactly how it needs to be. So that I'm very happy I listened to. And she's got a series on there as well where she's doing more of her own, like, just speaking and her thoughts. And it's just really interesting. So I'm very lucky to have the app and to be able to hear that. It's very good. And yeah, she's called Joan Tollefson. I think she's still alive. She's very nice. She's a very old lady, that's why I say that. That's awful.
I'm going to say that about everyone we talk to. Pretty sure they haven't died in the last hour.
Oh, I can't be sure of that. But no, she's brilliant from what I've heard. So I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more about her. But yeah, how about you, Dave? What have you put in your brain that has made you feel good or better?
Well, speaking of old drunks who lived through the 60s.
Yes.
I had so many different ideas for this, as it's our first one as well.
Yeah.
There's so many things that we've done over the course of the last God knows how long. That I was thinking to myself, maybe the first few I should pick, you know, like a big thing, like something I've been doing for ages. And then I went book shopping with my buddy and stumbled across a Kurt Vonnegut book that I don't have called While Mortals Sleep, which I've never read before. I've read all of his novels. Probably about 10 years ago now, my New Year's resolution, I think my only one that year, was to read every single Kurt Vonnegut book in order. And it was a fantastic experience and one which I would very much recommend. But I mean, if you've not read him, then just read anything. Yeah. Slaughterhouse 5 is an obvious start, but to be honest, for me, a lot of the other ones are a lot better. But I love his work anyway, and stumbling across some short stories which were all, I think, written in the 1950s-ish. It was before he was a famous writer, and he used to write for, like, magazines, because I suppose that was a thing that people did in the 50s and 60s. Magazines were made like Reader's Digest type things. They were made up of short stories, which seems like a much better use of the magazine format. I mean, even if you take it off the shelves and put it on into an internet type of thing, it's much better use than anything that we have now. But anyway, and so this is just a collection of these stories, and they're very simple, they're very lovely. I'm only about halfway through it, but it's just sort of rekindled this absolute love of him, and it's made me think a lot about I mean, we've referenced a lot in past episodes of the podcast of reading various things. And I would say that I work in a bookshop now. I love reading. I read an awful lot. But that absolutely wasn't always the case. And in fact, as a child, I don't think I had ever finished a book. I really liked the idea of being a reader, as a lot of teenagers may do. I had a lot of the ones that you should have as a teenager. I had On the Road. I had, I had all the ones. And my brother read a lot, and I think, in that sort of way that a younger brother sort of has his older brother as a hero, I always sort of saw reading as being this really good thing that you should definitely be able to do. And of course, Bill Hicks was another hero, and he talks about reading a lot. So anyway, I had this idea in my head that I should be a reader, and if you talked to me, I would have been like, I mean, On the Road's great, isn't it? It's great.
Such good books.
And I'd had a crack at most of them, but until I was probably about 18 or 19, I really was not a reader. And then even, to be honest, up until probably my late 20s, early 30s was when I really started to actually kind of get it. And I think reading is incredibly important in this context. It's such a big subject and such an obvious subject, but one that probably isn't talked enough about. I mean, for me, I think that, and I can only talk about myself, but I think that reading has opened my brain in a way, not just from getting loads of facts and experiencing culture and art, although all of those things absolutely are the case, but obviously you could do that in lots of different ways. But with reading, I just think it expands your brain in a way that's hard to kind of like put your finger on. And it's definitely expanded mine in ways that I cannot put my finger on, and created me into a completely different person that I was probably even 10 years ago. And this all started with Kurt Vonnegut, and just this morning, I had this thought. This is an embarrassing, a bit of it. Well, I mean, not that embarrassing, but just sort of hilarious to think that this is kind of what did it. I spent all of my teenage years, and probably even, I think I would have been around about 18 or 19. And I was reading a copy of, I don't know what, probably Kerrang, but a heavy metal magazine. And there was a band, long forgotten band, who I couldn't tell you anything about at all, although I know I did buy their album as well, who were interviewed in there, and their name was Kilgore, right? If anybody has heard of the band Kilgore, you're probably already chuckling, because I think they were basically like a sort of nu metal band, right? But they were a nu metal band where the singer thought, he's a clever guy, he likes literature. So, and I remember that, and in the context of sort of being someone that was in awe of everybody who could actually read, and really wanting to be someone who could actually read, I would have read, I don't remember this clearly, but I definitely know the type of person that I was. I would have read that thinking, God, this guy's so cool. Yeah. So wicked. And if I remember rightly, I remember him having a long spike coming out. You know, like the Disturbed guy. Yes. I don't think he had those like weird horns that Disturbed guy
But just one long spike out the middle.
I think he might have had one long spike out the middle, and he probably had like a really severe undercut.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah, I mean, just like,
did he have net sleeves in any way?
No, I don't think so.
Wasn't quite that much.
But perfectly. I'm not going to say yes or no, because I haven't gone back and checked
not
any
in this
of this
picture, but maybe in other interviews in Kerrang.
Maybe. This story is all from my memory, and my memory's not very good. So, but he mentioned, so Kilgore is based on a character that Kurt Vonnegut uses a lot, whose name is Kilgore Trout. He's kind of like an alternative version of himself. Talking about meta, I mean, Vonnegut was probably one of the most meta writers of his time. And so that's what made me go out and buy Slaughterhouse-Five when I was about 18. This fucking nu metal band who have vanished into the history of time. I tell you now, I'm going to go on Discogs at some point today, and I'm going to buy that album and just see how bad it is. I know it was bad, because I think that not only was it like nu metal, it was nu metal with kind of really emotive singing.
Yes.
So it's like the worst. I mean, they might. I don't know.
Say the worst.
Go back.
There's pretty bad nu metal.
Yeah, that's true, actually. I mean, yeah, at least they were talking about Vonnegut and not, fucking up.
I mean,
bitches.
was it just their name, or did they have any other references? Do you know?
Well, no. So, like I say, this guy, I'm doing this from memory, but as I recall, this guy was very keen to tell the Kerrang journalist, who I probably also thought would have been cool, but in hindsight was probably some spotty, like fresh out of university nerd who was just quickly, doing a piece, trying to get it in Kerrang. But he was very keen to make sure everybody knew. You know, like, I think at that time, I'm sure it's probably still the case, but I just don't necessarily keep my eye on sort of pop bands and things. Everyone that's kind of very much had a thing, you know?
Well, isn't there a current band that's called Ice Nine Kills? And that's
there
also,
is, but I don't
know if they...
Well, it's a Vonnegut reference, but I have no idea.
I don't know if they're sitting down doing that. I've seen one video of them, and I think they're more interested in their appearance by a long stretch.
Right. I thought they were a sort of kung fu hardcore band. Are they not? Are they?
Oh no!
Pretty...
I mean, I don't know. I couldn't tell you what they actually sound like, but they all had white shirts on, and I think they had like a pretend knife or something with them, or swords.
Great.
It's very odd. I mean, there's to my knowledge, no reference that I could visually see to do with Cat's Cradle, but yeah, no, and they were quite pretty boys, and I think it was kind of like loud metal with some emotional singing over the top. So actually, it's probably exactly the same. I mean, it might be Kilgore.
It might be that guy from Kilgore.
It could be.
A new band, but I
think he had eyeliner on, and so he looked kind of like, even though it was modern, it just kind of looked. He had the look of 2003 Kerrang rather than today. But maybe that's what today looks like.
Was it 4 young boys and then this guy who's probably in his 50s?
Oh, I wouldn't.
Well, in his 50s,
I wouldn't say so. I mean, unless he's really looked after himself, the oil of Ole is upon him. But I don't know. I saw maybe 10 seconds because it sounded like absolute hell, so I just turned it off. But it got me thinking, oh, that must be Vonnegut related.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, it definitely is. But the thing you've got to remember, of course, is that in more recent times, and maybe we might even have a listener young enough to be in this boat. Well, Slaughterhouse-Five became a curriculum book for like secondary school. So I'm sure that there's loads of people. I think John Cooper Clarke did as well. I mean, when I was at school, which it wasn't that long ago. I mean, Jesus, I know, saying old, I'm not that old, but it was definitely nothing that interesting. So anyway, I imagine that this little group of boys probably just did that thing that little groups of boys do, where they look around and say, what's our band going to be called? Oh, we can't be called Light Switch. There's already a band called Light Switch. So we can't be called Fridge. So I'll pick up a book and just flick through it. Oh, your mum's got some books, hasn't she? And they probably, this one's called Cat's Cradle. That would be a good name for a band. Oh, no, it's already taken. Let's flick through it. Oh, Ice Nine. So it might be that. Maybe. But anyhow, the point that I was trying to make before we went off on that aside was that this fucking douchebag from a new metal band got me to buy Slaughterhouse-Five, and that was the first book that I ever read and actually can honestly say enjoyed and finished to the end. And I think probably at that age anyway, it was partly because it made me laugh a bit, partly because it's weird as fuck, but also just because it's absolutely wonderful. And now to me, and it's been a while since I've read any Vonnegut because I read it all and sort of didn't go back to it, although I plan to. Just finding these little stories, which are very different in style because they were sort of his early writing and stuff. I don't know. There's something about his voice, and I think that's something that I find with reading, which is very important, is that you find certain people, and it's a very, very individual experience. This, and I'm sure everyone has it, but with completely different people, is that you find an author and they just write in a way that just speaks to you and that is really comfortable to you, or something. It's almost hard to explain what it is. But there's just something whereby you could just read that person forever. Yeah. And for me, it's probably more. But I think Vonnegut is the absolute ultimate of that. So it's like putting on a really comfortable pair of slippers. But important to say, a really comfortable pair of slippers that will question everything that you believe in, will completely change your brain in ways. It's a lovely pair of slippers. Jeez. It's challenging, it's beautiful, it's fucking art, it's just wonderful. And if I find meaning in anything, if I think anything is spiritual, it's Kurt Vonnegut's writing.
Oh, that's bloody lovely, David. What a bloody lovely thing.
And in 1950-something, I don't know when because it doesn't say, and I'm not going to look it up on the internet, he wrote a very short story, and it's basically just a question and answer between a man who's smashed someone he works with in the face with his phone, and he's being talked to by a police officer, and so it's just like a script of their discussion. It's wonderful. It's a beautiful thing. And the policeman asks him what is wrong with the world. And the guy says, everybody pays attention to pictures of things. Nobody pays attention to the things themselves.
100%.
In the 50s.
Oh my goodness. Are things intertwined? The tool thing and that is just exactly the same. People are more this happened yesterday. I went to a CrossFit competition, so you can imagine.
Talk about mean. And
there was an absolute lack of meaning and culture there. It was fun, but my goodness. And one of the people in my team was just every second that we had spare, like, let's get a photo, let's take a photo, we've got to make memories. And I was like, the making of a memory is not imperative on there being a photo of it. Memory is your brain, not your phone. Live in it there and then. Don't take a photo of it for the future so you can look at it in the past, because the only thing that's real is when you're actually having it. So if you miss actually having it by taking a video or taking a photo, same as that Bryan Adams concert, it's just like you're missing the experience of actually being here by videoing it for the future to look back as a memory. Just, there's no point. Memories aren't real. The future's silly. The only thing that's really happening is being there watching it. So why aren't you watching it?
Well, and that takes you back to Tool. Do you know that Tool thing? See, that is another very good example. And by the way, this is a Vonnegut quote. I just realised I said this earlier. I didn't even twin the two because it's just so on the tip of my tongue. But that idea of be careful who you pretend to be because you are who you pretend to be.
Oh, is that him?
That's Vonnegut.
Yeah.
Lush. That Tool thing is very much that. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, Tool are a band who have always purposefully, really actively tried to keep themselves a bit mysterious. To some extent, just the pure skill of them keeps them mysterious, if you know what I mean. I mean, I think people are sort of in awe. I think awe is a very important feeling, which we will definitely talk about in the future. But equally, on top of that, they've probably done a bunch of things which, frankly, might even be a bit twatty like in some respects. A bit definitely pretentious. Yeah. But also just things like, they don't give loads of interviews to people. They don't, they've just tried to maintain a certain mystique about them. And fundamentally, I'm sure they're just four normal blokes who are very good at their instruments. Maybe not normal. Maybe that's pushing it a bit. They're definitely very artistic and things. Yeah. And they've got some very interesting sort of hobbies and stuff, as far as I'm aware. But James Maynard Keenan recently has been on quite a few podcasts. He's definitely popped up on Joe Rogan a few times and things like that. And he's not a problematic man as such. But I think that just spending hours talking to people, and I've obviously listened to a few of them, it kind of ruins that mystique a little bit. But the point that I was trying to make is that going to see them live, there is a certain, and partly it's because it was at the O2, they've obviously got a lot of money to spend. The stage show was just absolutely insane. Yeah. And it's not something that any band that is at any other level could have ever accomplished. But it does sort of paint a picture of a band who are kind of like bigger than themselves. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, and then of course saying, we're going on a journey together. Yeah. Put your phones away, all of that sort of stuff. Kind of creates that environment again, doesn't it? Yeah. It sort of says this is a special thing that we're doing. We're all doing this together, and this is a special thing. And by default, therefore, we are a special band. But the thing is, the interesting thing about that is, and this is where it comes into that Vonnegut quote, is that of course it makes you feel that way. Yeah. They're pretending to be something more that they are, and they suck you in, and they make you believe that they are something that maybe is a bit above and beyond them. Yeah. And then on top of that, because probably for a lot of those people, for the first time in years, they actually put their fucking phones in their pocket. They then probably had the experience of being like, oh my God, that was amazing. Like, well, no, but you wouldn't think that way, would you? You wouldn't. So most people don't think to themselves, God, I should keep my phone in my pocket all the time. They would just think that gig was amazing. Yeah, something about that gig was special. So good. I must have just been in the right mood, and that band must be so special. And actually, in reality, it's just that you engage with it in a different way. And that's going nowhere. That point. No, but it was just an interesting thought about that Tool gig. I saw Tool. The last time I saw Tool was in 1996. Yeah. Just after Anima had come out. So I'm so happy to be able to say that. It was at the Astoria, which is the greatest venue ever and doesn't exist and hasn't existed for a long time. They actually played songs off that album, so you got to see them. They played songs off that album. But at that gig, they didn't quite have the money that they have now. And obviously they were a much smaller band and the Astoria was a much smaller venue. But as I recall, I'm fairly sure this is true, they just turned the lights off on the stage. So it was completely black and they just played. And there was something about that, again, like such a tiny little move that made it really special. And there is one other thing just to say, and in hindsight, this person was probably just some knob that something bad had happened to or something. But there was this point, I remember, of turning around and there was a guy sobbing whilst watching them, right? And that's always stuck with me. I was like, God, Tool are so amazing. They play so well. They make grown men cry. But of course, that was just a little, like a snippet. I was in the mosh pit or something, and I just looked out and saw someone sat on the floor sobbing, and then I think they jumped up and ran in the mosh pit. But it was like that again, is complete pretense and could be explained away by a million different things.
Yeah.
But in my 16-year-old brain, I was like, wow.
Oh my God, this music must be something.
Yeah.
To have that happen.
Yeah.
You're just saying about them playing in the darkness. That was another thing I quite liked. But at first I was like, that is pretentious as fuck. And I was like, but he's doing it with the idea of not being pretentious. And that's the singer was on 2 stages at the back that were not lit.
Yeah.
So you could just about see his like shadow or his silhouette even. But the spotlights were all on the other 3 members of the band. And I guess your reason for doing that could be, shine a spotlight on them. I've got this voice, but see the other people. And maybe it's pretentious to do that in a weird way, trying not to be pretentious, to be like, I must be in the background. Yeah. But it's still really effective because for some reason you're drawn into it and you're still like, there's this ethereal voice and I cannot see where it's coming from in an arena. Like, this is insane. And the others aren't really moving around or doing anything, as in, they're doing an awful lot. Yeah, I mean, they're playing the most difficult music known to man.
They were moving their hands a lot.
Yeah. But it's just, I don't know, there's just something about that again, it adds to the whole atmosphere of the whole thing. Yeah, it's good. Well, that was a long intro.
Oh, you better get used to that.
Yeah, I know.
The listener.
It's going to be a waffle and a warble at all times. But so that's what we've put in our brains to make our lives feel more meaningful and more interesting. One thing that I thought about in the last couple of weeks for discussion, and it was just, we were walking back from the shops and a Southern Water truck drove past us.
Okay.
And I immediately...
Just for the international listeners, Southern Water are the people who provide us with water.
Provide us with our water.
I mean, you might well have been able to work that out.
Yeah, we're in the Hastings. In the Hastings, we're in Hastings in the UK. If we'd not mentioned that before, or if you didn't already know. So yeah, Southern Water. They're a man driving one of their trucks drove by, and if you're not up to scratch with UK news at the moment, Southern Water have been pretty rubbish recently since our company lifted whatever sanctions or bans were on dumping sewage. Southern Water have been a prime company for dumping sewage in our sea, and so most of the sea on the south is unswimmable at many times of the year because there's too much fecal matter in the sea, which is mad. So they have been the subject to a lot of scrutiny for that, but again, it doesn't really come to anything because we are beholden to the people that give us our water. So everyone's very annoyed and kind of just shouting at the sky for this one because no one is taking it seriously, or nothing that we can see has been doing about it. So people get really angry about Southern Water. Add to this, recently we had a pipe burst in our local woods and it left all of Hastings and St Leonard's, the local part of our town, without water. I think it was 30,000 households had no water for the entirety of a bank holiday weekend, which I think is the most financially beneficial weekend for nearly all businesses in Hastings. It's a very big thing for our town. So again, a lot more hate coming to Southern Water's way. So anyway, I saw this truck drive past us and I was immediately triggered by an emotion of, oh, that fucking asshole. And then my brain just kind of went on a bit of a wander on that thought. I was like, well, actually, is that man in that truck actually an asshole? No, he's probably some poor man paid however he's paid by this company to do his job. He probably does his job really well. I don't have a clue. Who am I to judge that particular man? And I then tried to follow that thought back to the company. I'm like, well, actually, is everyone in Southern Water an asshole? Just because this company are now polluting our sea and left us without water for so long, who in that company is actually horrible? Would anyone in that company actually go, ha ha ha, 4 days without water, who cares? Or ha ha ha, I'm going to deliberately put poo in the sea to make sure that the fish die and people can't go in the sea. Is anyone
by the
actually...
way, there's a decent amount of human beings in Hastings who have also put poos in the sea. I'm sure. Definitely plenty of urines.
And it then just got me thinking, like, these generalizations we make, because then I followed it back even further and I was like, well, Southern Water is a big company, a corporation. It's making stupid amounts of profit and yet increasing their bills. I mean, it was in the news recently that water companies are going to put up their bills a considerable amount, and Southern Water was quoted, and this might be insane just because of the number, quoted as increasing their bills by 97% in the next couple of years, so doubling their water bill.
Well, not quite doubling. Not
quite, but nearly doubling their bill. So again, they are the target of an extraordinary amount of hate. And it's like, well, actually, where do you draw the line as to who the evil person is? Is the people, is the people in this corporation who are being told they have to keep making profit, are they specifically evil? Are they not under some kind of trap from the people above them that are saying, you need to do this, you need to do that? How much say do people have? And are people actually that much of an asshole? I don't know, but it just got me thinking, like, when you track it back, is this idea of like badness and evil and the way that we can attach that label to an entire group, especially corporations, especially, the world is a capitalist thing, everyone's increasing their profit at the beholden of poor people, and the whole system is absolutely not ideal and is awful, and it screws over so many people. But we get used to the idea that it only screws over our level of people, and everyone above us are the assholes. But that must continue up the rungs, you know what I mean? So like the higher up you go, those people are still, the higher managers and the not the CEOs maybe, but I don't know, it just carries on. They're all answerable to this higher up rung of someone who they will then consider the asshole. And then I guess, if you want to go there, the ultimate arsehole ends up just being the idea of capitalism and the fact that we're stuck in it, and maybe everyone's just stuck under this same rung. But we're just all so quick to be like, that group's an arsehole. And I saw this Southern Water truck with this poor man who's probably been working all night fixing some pipe that no one's going to thank him for. And my immediate thought is, oh, fucking hell, Southern Water, you arseholes. It just got me thinking about who... Is anyone genuinely trying to be an arsehole, or do we all have to always contextualise that?
Well, ultimately, I think that the arsehole isn't really a person, is it, in this context? Because the arsehole is the laws created around corporations, which say that no matter what, the only decisions you're allowed to make by law in corporations is the one that's going to make you the most money. Yeah. So in that context, you could probably argue... it wouldn't be a very popular argument, but you could probably argue that nobody is responsible directly because the decision is being made for them, fundamentally. We might have talked about that film, The Corporation. It's a bit out of date now, but it's from the early 2000s, I think.
Definitely still worth a watch.
Canadian
I've never seen
documentary. It was based on a book as well, and the book's really good. But that's... more or less that the corporation, which is not a person, but is treated by law as a person, the corporation itself means that that legally it has to be evil, basically, and that the people that are living that out are just people doing what the law tells them they have to do. Now, that certainly isn't to say that they aren't greedy. It certainly isn't to say that people don't do what's in their best interests. But maybe the question is who isn't doing anything in their best interests? If we argue that this person's making too much money, is it not just because we want to make more money?
I mean...
Or not spend as much money, maybe, is a more reasonable in the context of the 97% price hike.
I mean, I guess I don't know where the line ends, but for example, the kind of people that choose to be those higher up people in those companies... is there a type of person that's doing that, or could that be said to be traits of something? But I do see that there's like this overall Everyone, that's what I mean. Like, everyone's answerable to the thing above them, and eventually the thing above them is the corporation, which is a no one.
Well, our society rewards psychopaths.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and this is something that no one can really do anything about. I mean, it just is. Our
Yeah.
entire society is set up that the most psychopathic will, some will become murderers or whatever. But if you can get through life
Not murdering.
without murdering or doing something really unpleasant to someone, you can be extraordinarily successful in business. But then, to take your thought even further, is the psychopath's fact that they're a psychopath their fault? Because psychology would suggest no, of course it's not. I mean, it's literally their upbringing. It's literally the fact that they were given no love.
Yeah.
Is there an argument to say that psychopaths are probably some of the least happy people in the world? Well, they don't realise that they're unhappy. But if anybody thinks that Donald Trump is a happy man who goes home and thinks to himself, what a great day I'm having, I'm so happy,
I mean,
then you're fucking mad.
Aren't there insiders that have outwardly said this man is so stressed? Like, he is so not okay.
But it's beyond
Not that
stress. I mean, I
him.
think it's more subtle than that. Yeah, of course. I mean, imagine being as useless as Donald Trump clearly is, and as completely incapable of, like, sensible thought as he clearly is, being put in charge of a country. I mean, of course that's a stressful experience.
And also not realising that, because also I think he wants to do it as well.
Well, but he's driven that way. But why is he driven that way? He's driven that way is because he's fucking useless. And his dad, who brought him up to be a psychopath,
told him he's amazing.
Make of that what you will. Was himself very successul.
Oh yeah.
So throughout his entire life, he's just never lived up to any sort of expectations, probably. And I mean, it's not really about feeling sorry for him, but it's just,
I think it's about remembering that people are created, not born that way. I mean, that's a bone of contention, I'm sure, but I totally believe that people are created the way that they're created. Big reason for not having children. Just saying. Some of you do it, great for you, but oh my lord.
But also, why would you actually want to be that person? One of the things that I think our conversations about this sort of thing often happen. We say, these, goddamn CEOs, they earn so much money. And, Donald Trump, he's just got all the money in the world and he can do whatever he wants. Well, yeah, but would you actually want that? Would you want to be that? And I mean, I don't know. Maybe most people would say, well, yeah, of course I would. It would be amazing to have all the money in the world. I would argue no. I mean, I would rather have a sort of vaguely fulfilling, thoughtful life with no money than to be a multi-billionaire who's got no emotions.
Yeah, no emotions. Seemingly always stressed. Definitely not enjoying their life, even if they think they might be.
There's lots of different types of poverty. There's clearly financial poverty, and that's something that needs to be addressed. And in some respects is for some people is absolutely terrible, and we can go down that path without question. But there's also like poverty of spirit, for want of a better turn of phrase. There's poverty of mental health, and I don't necessarily mean that in the context. I mean, when you talk about mental health, we're often talking about people who are at the bottom rungs of the sort of societal ladder. And if you bring up mental health, you immediately sort of think of, it's a certain level of people. Well, but mental health affects us all, and so actually, for example, psychopathy, but any sort of stressful environment. I mean, imagine being a fucking CEO of a major company. It would be shit. And yes, you get loads of money, but what do you do with that money? And this is a much bigger question, and I don't really, it's going to sound extraordinarily trite, but I mean, money just does not buy you happiness. You can have a massive car, a brilliant car, a massive TV, you can live in a massive house, but if you're empty, I was having a conversation with someone the other day about this, pretty much this exact thing, and it's again, it's pretty trite and pretty obvious thing to say, but it's that kind of Kurt Cobain dichotomy. You want to be a rock star your entire life. The only thing that you want to be is a rock star. You can't imagine anything other than that. You're absolutely driven to do that. And then you get to become the biggest rock star in the world, who will be remembered forever, who's written some of the, probably songs that people would consider the greatest songs ever written. And you realise that you've done all the things you want to do, but you're still you.
Yeah.
And you're fucking gutted because nothing changes. Your innards don't change just because you've got all the money in the world and all the success in the world. And I think that's probably true of us all to different levels. That's the other thing. I mean, success isn't just you're either a CEO of a corporation or you're homeless. Yeah. There's masses in between that we're all slightly more or less successful than each other.
And I think, unfortunately, we now have the realm of social media that just completely amplifies that bit of us that needs that, and this comparative, not needs it, but there's parts of us that are always comparing and always trying to figure out our success based on other people's success, and thinking that we are feeding ourselves rather, I don't know, like we see other people on Instagram and social media generally and just think, oh wow, they're having such a good life. My life needs to look like that.
They're at the Bryan Adams concert. I wish I was there.
And you think that if you get that thing that you'll be happy, so then maybe you go get that thing, and target advertising comes along and goes, oh, you think you like this thing, get this other thing, you'll still be happy, and at the end you're still kind of sad thinking of the next thing. And it's like, that's not going to make you, none of this makes you happy. There's something missing. It's something other than constantly getting stuff and constantly comparing yourself isn't actually going to make you happy. You have to go further than that. What that Solve for Happy book that we've referenced before, and actually forgotten his name.
Mo Gawdat.
Mo Gawdat. He was another example of that. He was a CEO of Google X, I think it was called. He's an engineer. He did extraordinarily well, was extraordinarily wealthy, thought that happiness was in expensive cars, so he got expensive cars, got more expensive cars, got bigger houses, because he was like, well, one of these things will make me happy. But he was just so miserable. And whilst all this was happening, he was watching his family grow up without him. And he was like, oh my God, like, these aren't the things that make you happy. I can see over there the things that make me happy, and I'm actively not with them. And so then, I mean, he's written this book, so, you know, definitely go read it, because it's life-changing. It's so wonderful, and it's so easily read and wonderfully written. But yeah, he just made an extraordinarily, well, he made a lot of changes, but I say extraordinarily. He ditched the things that weren't making him happy and concentrated on what was. And that was about connection, and it was about, well, he's taken to it like an engineer. He's written an algebraic equation for it. So go read the book, because it's not as complicated as it sounds, but it is a really clever and interesting and different way to think about happiness. But at the end of the day, it is about stripping it down to what's important.
Well, much of what he did was kind of reframe this sort of stoic idea, which I think is, you know, stoicism has kind of come into the zeitgeist a little bit, I think, and along with sort of mindfulness and stuff. There's all these different things that have picked up steam, and I think stoicism is one of them. And it's about almost minimizing what you expect from the world, isn't it? Stoicism. I'm not going to do a very good job of describing it in full, but you know, most of what we find, and going back to sort of, you were talking about Buddhism earlier. I mean, this is what the suffering in Buddhism is all about, isn't it? It's kind of like, if you go out for the day and you expect everything to be absolutely perfect, then you're going to be disappointed, and you're probably going to have a shit day. Yeah. If you go out and expect things to just sort of maybe even not be very good, then anything good that happens, you're actually going to experience happiness. Well, and those things, the reason I again, there's so much more to stoicism, but you know, but on that level, if you think about it, those things have nothing to do with your financial situation, nothing to do with your social situation, really. It's all about looking at where you are. Yeah. I think you've got a Buddhist book that's called Start Where You Are, and I feel like I was about to reference it right now. But that refers to this, doesn't it? It's like you are what you are, and you are where you're at. Yeah. And that could be terrible or it could be brilliant. Yeah. But fundamentally, or, you know, to look at, it could appear terrible or appear brilliant. But fundamentally, it just is. And so therefore, I suppose your aim has got to be just to make the most of that without expecting anything. You can't expect to be. There's no point in looking at a Kardashian's Instagram account and being like, God, I wish I had their curtains. Well, first of all, why are you wishing you had anyone's curtains? Because that's a completely empty thought. But second of all, why are you comparing yourself to someone who's got all of that money? Exactly. And why is that important? Why does that make? Because they're probably not happy people. Yeah. Well, this is the other thing. Coming back to people who you perceive as assholes or you only have bad thoughts about. I kind of use two of these things I try to at least, on an almost daily basis with people who I find quite difficult at, say, work. There's, not trying to throw anyone under the bus, but there's a couple of people that I just find extraordinarily difficult, and to the point where I'm like, I feel like you were just cruel. And it's really hard to break out of that feeling because, or I don't understand why you are so slow or so hell-bent on not doing any work. And I get really angry about that. And so I have to combine two little things in my brain, which is that expectation
lowering expectation to have happiness. And I say this to those who are supervised who also get angry about the same people. They come and they're like, but why won't they do this? And why on earth are they being so horrible? And I'm just like, but why are you expecting them to be different for a start? And that's not pessimistic, it's just realistic. Start from expecting, just have no expectation as best you can. Work around and do your best and see the goods in them and expect those goods and stop focusing on the bad things. But then also, that Start Where You Are book is by a lady called Pema Chodron, and she's really lovely and it's a really wonderful book. The book is about compassion, and it's about just taking a moment to, instead of be irritated by someone, turn that irritation into being interested in them. Like, instead of just going, they've done something that's horrible and they're an arsehole, and just making all these jumps to conclusions very quickly that if you keep having them, your brain will decide that that's truth. Those pathways in your brain will solidify, and lo and behold, that person's an arsehole. And you'll actually even put it onto them before they've done anything. That's what I do with this person at work.
Be careful who you pretend to be because you are who you pretend, or be careful who you pretend other people are because they are who you pretend to be.
100%. If I see I'm working with these particular people, I come in expecting my day to be shit, and I've already put it on them. It's not fair. So then, yeah, instead of being irritated, try and notice that irritation and try and recognize that thought as just, what it is, a thought, and go, can I change that in any way? Can I actually, what we're saying about putting into your brain is what comes out. Can I put a better thought in there? One of interest into that person, and that's where compassion starts. And I think, okay, so with this particular person, she's definitely not listening to this, so it's absolutely fine. I know she's a widow. I know that she's really sad in her life, and I can't imagine how hard her life is outside of work. And while she doesn't seem to be getting anything socially out of work, I've learnt to try and, every time she's offering a cup of tea, every time she is doing those kind things, try and think, actually, she definitely sees these things as ultimately really kind, and she's trying to connect with people. So whilst I see her as extraordinarily cruel and trying her hardest not to work, she gets something out of being at work. She's doing so much overtime, and it's not for money at this point. It's to not be in her house. And recently, the loveliest thing has happened. She's probably not thinking it's the loveliest thing, but I know that something's changed at home. I think her daughter has moved out. I didn't know that prior to the last 2 weeks that I've worked with her. And the last 2 weeks, I have been shocked at how much of a change. She's been so lovely. No task is too great. Just doing everything. And I'm like, I cannot, but not only have I had my thoughts about her challenge, and actually I need to get rid of my thoughts about her because it's not fair, but now she's changed and something's changed in her. And it's so good to see, and I'm so happy, and it's good to be interested in her to find out why, and trying to find the least patronizing way to feed this back and be like, whatever's changed for you, I just really enjoy working with you. I've just told a supervisor and hopes it passes down in a really nice way, because I just feel like a patronizing, weird, embarrassing. I mean, we should be able to just speak to people nicely and be like, do you know what? Usually things can be weird, but today's been really nice. But anywho.
Well, that's society's expectations as well, isn't it? Imagine being nice to someone. That would be awful. Imagine saying something positive to someone. That would be dreadful.
I know, it's crazy. But it's just been really interesting. My little mindful project has been with this specific person, because I know, doing supervision with other staff, they struggle, and I'm always just lower your expectations, and that's not being rude. It's just look after your own mental health each day by not, why are you getting angry about someone who has no idea what you're being angry about? It's so silly, and all you're doing is making yourself upset. But it also reminds me of this, are people genuinely trying to be horrible? I don't, but there are times where I've convinced myself that this particular person is cruel. And I mean that, I used to mean that with every ounce of what that word means, because I couldn't explain it any other way. And recently I've just tried to challenge myself to be try not to explain it. Don't even see it as cruel. Cruel is still, even if you think that's true, it's only still your thought, and it isn't, your thought is not a truth. That person, maybe you may find them cruel, but that doesn't mean that they are cruel. And she comes with a whole story. And I just think that about when we perceive people or groups or anything as evil, and we generalize it as a whole, because evil is still only one aspect of someone. Someone could be a little bit evil. Who knows? I don't know. What does evil really mean? But or cruel, or could be a little bit horrible. But it's about seeing things as far more complex as that. If we generalize it, the only person that gets upset is us, because it's our thought that's screwed us up. And it's trying to remember that, like, I don't know, maybe there's more to people. But I don't know that it's really hard sometimes to justify whether that is entirely true. It's a really lovely way to think when you're clear-headed. But when there are massive companies making money, like you say, beholden to the corporation.
Well, we could probably learn a little bit from this guy called Viktor Frankl. So it's funny.
Your new mate.
So funnily enough, when you brought up this idea of doing this podcast about Southern Water, I just finished.
It was exciting. I presented it really excitedly. Just as that. Can we do a podcast about Southern Water, please? No more discussion. It's just going to be that. Make your mind map.
It was literally just after I'd finished a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's quite a famous book. It's perfectly possible that you've heard of it. It's a guy that wrote it just after coming out of a concentration camp. I'm not comparing Southern Water with Nazis, but I sort of am, actually. Because his book is incredibly interesting. So he's obviously a Jewish guy. He ended up in, I think, Auschwitz, although he was moved around quite a lot. Prior to being put in there, he was a psychologist. He was continued to be a psychologist, obviously, but he became held in this concentration camp. And his book is all about both the horrific things that he saw, but also, and I don't know if he ever actually describes himself as a Stoic, but fundamentally, it's like a Stoic impression of what is going on and the way in which he was able to keep himself sane.
Yeah.
And the way that he kept himself sane through this concentration camp was basically community and giving, trying to do things for other people.
Yeah.
So, there's these awful descriptions of they were made to work 12 hours a day, doing this heavy labour, and then at the end of the day they were given basically what was more or less a water, but it was a soup. It was called a soup, but it had nothing in it.
Yeah.
And a tiny bit of bread. And the way that he kept saying was, if there was someone worse off than him, he would, give them his bread, for example, or whatever. If someone was physically unwell and this sort of thing. And his attitude to it is what he believes, sort of maintained his sanity in a way that obviously an awful lot of people didn't. And on top of that, there was this kind of desperate need to stay somewhat sane, because if you lost it, then you were dead, basically.
Yeah.
So it's both horrific and incredibly heartwarming and beautiful. But one of the interesting things about the book, and this is where the Southern Water thing comes in, and I do feel weird saying that, but I'm going to use this comparison just because it happened to come up at the time, is that there was a lot of people who were also prisoners in the concentration camp, but they were called capos. They were kind of people that had gained a bit of trust, and they were sort of in charge of keeping everybody in line. And obviously they were also, they were victims of the Nazis. They were prisoners in a concentration camp. But some of them used the little bit of power that they had to be absolutely awful to their sort of fellow prisoners. And
it's like a real life version of that experiment that may or may not have happened.
The Stanford prison experiment, yeah. It did happen. I just don't think that the results were quite what people thought. But
like given half a chance, people could be horrible.
Yeah, but ultimately, the really interesting thing, and it's one of the last things that happens in the book, and please know, I'm not in any way, again, we're talking about Nazis here, so I mean, I'm just want to acknowledge the fact that I'm about to do that, because there was a guard, a Nazi, a member of the SS, who treated people really well, and did things to make sure that they basically, he saved people's lives fundamentally by underhandedly kind of, doing things, and so the prisoners were aware of this, and so at the end of the war, Frankl is still in the concentration camp at the end of the war, and obviously the sort of allies or whatever you want to call them all come in to kind of like sort out the Nazis and free all of the Jewish people, or not just Jewish people, obviously all of the concentration camp prisoners. And a lot of the concentration camp prisoners hid this SS guard and wouldn't tell the Allies that where he was, because they didn't want him to be killed. And the only reason they gave him up, they made them promise that they wouldn't harm him in any way, because he had been so good to them. And it's like, trust me, I'm not saying, oh, come on, guys, some of the Nazis were all right. That's not in any way what I'm trying to say. But the thing is it's just such an interesting little moment in this book. Because it's exactly that. It's exactly what you're saying. It's kind of like, even the worst fucking people in the world, some of them aren't necessarily exactly what they appear to be.
Yeah.
Or, as is most likely, they are a bit what they appear to be. He was a Nazi, you know.
Yeah, you still mean.
I'm not saying he's a great guy. But it's just that human beings are extraordinarily complex.
Yeah.
And reading this book, it was interesting partly because it's like we look at both sides of that in really simplistic ways, I think. So when we think about the Second World War, and obviously there's a good deal of history has gone by, and we look back on it, and quite rightly we look at it and we say, God, these people in the concentration camps, that's so awful, and these people were the good guys, right? And then these Nazis were the bad guys. Now, of course, unquestionably, yes, that's right. Like, I'm not, trust me, I'm not in any way suggesting that isn't. But it's just that there was nuances within that, right? And there was people within that who didn't quite fit into exactly what you might think. And so taking it maybe forward to your Southern War example, I mean, I think it's slightly different because, of course, the people, just some grub that's working for Southern Water driving a van around is completely separate to any, shit things that anybody else is deciding about. But I think this definitely comes into politics. Like, we just assume the people in this party are all the worst and the people in this party are all the best. And that might be true, but it also might not be true. And there's complications to it. And some people are trying their best to do something that they think is right. And it might be the opposite of what you think is right, but it doesn't make them evil. No. It makes them someone who views the world in a slightly different way to you. Now, some of them might be evil. Some of them might be psychopaths.
Yeah.
Some of them might be incredibly damaged.
Yeah.
I'm quite sure most of them, most people in politics are probably very damaged people. I imagine. Just by the fact that they've chosen to go into it. But it just brings that to mind, I suppose, is that I think we're incredibly simplistic about judging people by what we assume that they're going to be, both in positive and negative ways. Yeah,
I think you're entirely right. I think, and we see it over and over again, and yet we're really quick to put people in these camps and then leave them there, and they are either good or bad. Like you say, we do it all the time in politics, and actually it's getting further and further stretched sideways. The left have become really left, and if you're not with us, you're against us, and the right have become really right in various ways. Well, and then there's this weird centre ground that is the old right that is just kind of sat there going, and then there's this, I don't know what Labour's doing nowadays, but everyone's upset with them as well because they do nothing, just sat in the middle doing nothing as well.
They're sitting it out so that they just find power by just not doing anything.
Just by not being a conservative right now.
The other option is hated so much that it's important that they don't make any policies, because if they make a policy and it's the wrong one, then
exactly it's madness,
which I don't think is how democracy is supposed to work.
No,
I had a conversation we had a little local elections quite recently. I had a conversation with someone, and they were extraordinarily clear that the way that you decide how to vote is you vote against the people you don't like.
Oh yeah, tactical voting has never been more like.
Tactical voting is one thing, but I'm talking about literally just. I was like, so what is it that you like about this person that you're voting for? Because I had looked into all of that. It was a very local thing. So I had done my due diligence, and I'd found out about all of the different candidates, found that all of them were completely empty.
Well, and the way you did it was depending on what literature got put through the door. You were like, I refuse to scan a QR code. I refuse to just be, I want a leaflet through the door. I want door-to-door campaigning.
No, I did also look at the websites.
We're mid-2000s. Oh, did you?
I looked at websites. No, I'm on the internet. I didn't use social media in any way.
Yeah, of course.
But the point is, I'm not saying I was some sort of expert, not at all, but I was just interested because I found nothing in any of the candidates that in any way made me think even, this person's half decent. They all just seemed like utter scumbags.
Yeah.
And the people that I was talking to who were very, you should vote. I'm not sort of saying anything against voting, but they were extraordinarily like, you must vote. We must do this.
Yeah.
And I said, well, so the person you're voting for, why? Out of interest. And the answer was not, well, because they're going to do this, or because I believe in their party, or because their party believes in this. It was, well, I hate this other person who's the other option, and that person's going to get in otherwise.
Yeah.
Well, that's not democracy.
No.
That means that politics is utterly broken, because what we're doing is not actually voting for anything that we believe in. In fact, like we say, most of the parties don't even want to tell us what they believe in, just in case,
Just in case
we
you
get it
vote for them or
wrong.
you don't vote for them.
Yeah, so it's just, oh well, I hate these people, so
Yeah.
the opposite must be all right. Well, that's that. I doubt most people know what the people that they hate really believe in.
Yeah.
I bet they've not. I don't know. Has anybody listening to this look? Let's be blunt, because we're sort of skirting around where we obviously all stand and don't stand. Does anybody know the Conservatives' policies? I would
right
be
now.
very surprised. I'd be very surprised if anyone's read them. They just,
Yeah.
because why would they? Because they hate them, because they're just clearly
Just
bad.
hate them all the time.
And they probably are bad, and you probably do disagree with them. But that's
Yeah.
not. But you're not engaging in democracy if you don't find out all of the options.
And I think it's also about. So I've been challenged ever so slightly recently because I've been reading Rory Stewart's book. And Rory Stewart is an ex-Conservative MP. He ran for the leadership. He also ran for mayor. He's been and around.
He was so bad, he lost to Boris Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, but he's such an interesting person to hear his experience, because he wasn't someone that wanted to get into politics in the first place. He did a lot of foreign aid and things in Afghanistan, and he did loads and loads of stuff long before he came into politics, and he went into politics to try and make a difference on a local level. So he came in like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. He was young at the time, but like it isn't the first thing he's ever done, sort of thing. He hasn't come in as a young junior person trying to work their way up. He's come in because he's seen other ways of helping the world and he wants to do it properly. And he just assumed that everyone else wanted to do that. And so, yeah, he's a ex-Conservative, so I should be like, oh, well, he's a Tory, he's an arsehole.
Oh, he's still a Conservative.
He is still Conservative, actually.
He's not an
because
MP, but he's...
I think he says that he tries to word it as I'm a Tory, but as the party stands, I'm not really a Conservative.
No,
but
he's
I
a
am,
Conservative, but not a Tory.
There we are.
You just
There
said
we
it.
are. Well, I'm reading the book really well, as you can tell. But he just has so much joy and so much like determination to do work, and got completely screwed over by his party. And you just I'm reading it right now. It's just all these different people he keeps speaking to that are saying, you have actual knowledge about that area. Well, you can't be in that vote because we just need people that toe the party line. You've got to stop being interesting because people don't like interesting. People just want the party line to be told.
But in so many ways, that is also the fault of us.
Yeah.
So one of the things about this is that politics, I think, is in a right old state. But one of the reasons that it's in a right old state is because of the reason why people vote for different people.
Yeah.
It's so, populism is talked about so much, but I feel like in some sense of the word, all politics is just populism, because all that anybody's trying to do is win a populist vote.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, there's nothing behind it, really. There's not really... I mean, there is stuff behind it. I'm sure that people believe... I'm sure people like him, like lots of people, they join politics with loads of beliefs and really have some opinions. But the actual political system itself is basically like Pop Idol. It's just like this whoever...
100%.
And I think that's our fault. Well, not our fault directly, me and you, but or probably, it makes no difference what we say on this little thing. But like, it's us as humans' votes. It's us as humans' fault, because we are not engaging in democracy. We're not engaging in actually finding out about what these people believe in. We're just saying, don't like that one, that one,
and you're either with us or against us.
Yeah, I read this paper, so I vote this way. I read that paper, so I vote that way.
It's not even that. Like, I share these things on my Instagram stories, and if you're in any way, or everyone believes that they have a platform now. I mean, you technically do.
They do.
Sorry, but you've got to be using your platform, and if you're not, and it's this kind of like encouragement to share these little things, but what you're sharing you haven't read. It isn't a useful piece of information. It hasn't. People are just siding with other people without finding out what's going on.
But it's all going into an empty void as well.
And it's just going round and round and round and round and round. I mean, we're all going to basically, one party's going to get out in this country, and we're going to be replaced with an absolute nothing that in 2 years' time everyone's going to hate, and then someone else will come in, and God knows what. It just doesn't. Nothing's answered. Nothing's gained. We're just kind of going round and round. But we all know that we hate one group.
But I recently read a couple of histories, more or less histories. Yeah, I think that's fair, of the 90s.
Yeah.
Or the 80s, 90s, and noughties, actually, different books. And you know, the last time Labour got in was like the Blair years, the whole new Labour thing. And at the time, you know, I was there, I suppose, you know, to some extent, not really involved, too young to be involved. But looking back at the 90s, there was this incredible positive movement. Everybody felt really good about being British. It was in a fairly problematic way in a lot of ways, but it did mean that the country was like alive. You know, music was really was at its best in people's eyes. Filmmaking was at its best. All art, you know, the new young artists were all becoming really big. You know, it felt like a prosperous time.
Yeah.
We weren't at our richest by any means in a financial sense, but we were sort of doing all right.
Yeah.
And so we look back on that period of the 90s of Blair getting in as just being this sort of like really good time. Probably the last good time we had, pre 9/11, pre social media.
And what was his song that he used? Was it Things Can Only
Get Better?
I mean, come on, positivity all round.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, the thing that I didn't necessarily realise at the time, because, you know, Cool Britannia was still sort of going on, was that, you know, within about 6 months of that Labour Party getting in, everyone was just hated the Labour Party because they didn't do anything that they said. Yeah. It turned out they didn't really say that they were going to do anything very much, and the whole thing was a disaster. But also, ironically,
can't wait for it to happen again.
But this is not a pro-conservative podcast by any means. But the interesting thing about that whole Cool Britannia period is that it's kind of, at least if you look back on it, it's like remembered as this thing that New Labour did. But actually, in reality, it's not at all. It's a thing that John Major did. John Major, when he was Prime Minister, put loads and loads of money into the arts. He got loads of different sort of benefits for people that were trying to do artistic projects and things like that. And ironically, if I may say, John Major was a genuinely working class boy from Brixton, and Tony Blair was an upper middle class, if not upper class, boy from, well, I think Scotland originally, but I think from, you know, Oxford or Cambridge. But of course they were painted in a completely different way, and you know, John Major was very boring, so that didn't help him in any way. But you know, it just reminds me of the here and now. It's this thing of just like, well, at that time, and it was obviously, you know, Thatcher was very much still a sort of figure within the Conservative Party, so that was all going on. But actually, Thatcher also put loads. I mean, didn't. The other space to do it was because the Conservatives, in order to keep unemployment figures down, if you were like an artist or whatever, you would just be given benefits, but you would not be counted as unemployed. So they had some, I don't know what it was called, I cannot remember.
That's amazing.
So yeah, I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't quite that easy. I've simplified it immeasurably. Yeah. But the point is that as a result of Thatcher, people refer to a lot of the 90s bands as being like Thatcher's children, and partly I think it's because they were like reacting against her. That's how it's viewed. But actually, in reality, they were given the opportunity to do that through her policies. Yeah. And definitely through John Major's policies. So it's interesting to go back and read it as a historical thing, because you suddenly realise, shit. So my narrative is, Tories are in for a long period of time, miners' strikes, everything's bad. Yeah. And you know, don't get me wrong, everything I'm sure was
and
pretty
all that's
bad.
Still true.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not. And then New Labour came in, and suddenly, you know, Oasis are top of the charts, and you know, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels is being made, and all the, you know, and Damien Hirst has cut a pig in half or whatever, But that and then, you know, and then 9/11, and then awful war, and then Tony Blair bad, and then, oh god, therefore we got the Conservatives, and then suddenly fucking Brexit. You know, that's kind of my narrative, right? And I'm sure
pretty good book. You should write that in those exact words.
But that's as good as my history of that period gets, really. Apart from that time when I read a interview by the singer from Kilgore,
of course.
But
which changed your life, good.
But the point, again, it's that nuance thing, I suppose. It's like reading the history of it, you suddenly realise, well, actually, that's not at all what happened. Yeah. I mean, it appeared to be that way because that's just how I sort of saw it. And obviously I was a kid as well. So, I mean, I wasn't turned on in any way to it all. But I suppose, again, it's just that things are extraordinarily complicated. Yeah. And they're extraordinarily complicated now. You know?
Exactly, but yet I guess you're looking back without the level of emotion and tribalism that would have maybe been experienced at the time, and now we have so much emotion and tribalism we're experiencing. I wonder what this bit of history is going to look like in a couple of years, a couple of decades time, when people write a book about this. Like, what are we going to look back at and go, oh gosh, remember when we all thought that?
I mean,
now look how it's turned out.
Probably everything, but then...
But we can't ever see it in the
But
minute.
we need to be the people to not do that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you know, whilst all of this was going on in the 90s, there was also horrific levels of homophobia, you know, sexism, everything else. But the punk scene was the one place that was speaking out about those things. Those things have now, relatively speaking, come into like normalcy in mainstream society. I'm not saying they've ended or everything's perfect, but those things have improved a great deal and now are quite mainstream ideas, particularly amongst the young. So therefore, just taking that, you know, and that's a very simplistic way of saying it, but therefore those people who were in the sort of alternative scene, the counterculture, if you like, they were all looking ahead to the thing that was going to come in a positive way. They were saying, well, no, you know, racism's bad, you know, sexism's bad, and actually fucking doing something about it too, you know, and so we were ahead of the curve. Yeah. Well, I don't see that in the counterculture now, and counterculture is probably a very nice way of describing it, because I don't even know if it is a counterculture anymore. But within the punk scene, we're not ahead of the curve anymore. We're not looking forward to something that in 10 years' time people are going to say, oh yeah, those guys were right. Yeah. We're just jumping in the fucking pool with all of the other morons and shouting about how everything's terrible.
I love that. That should be like the snippet. You know, when there's clickbait, if we ever did this on YouTube, just that will be the sentence that will be put on the front and be like, what is he saying about
No,
us?
what we would do if it was that is something like, I can't believe he said that about the Tories. That's what we would have if we were going to have that clickbait.
Something like that. Or Tory lover or something awful.
Can't believe he's come out with that opinion of... And the last one would have just been, can't believe he thinks there's a God-shaped hole in everyone's heart.
David in his God-shaped hole. Oh, gosh.
Well, so I think maybe we should finish, because we've gone on a bit of a journey there. I don't necessarily think I was thinking it was going to be quite as politicized, but it probably makes sense that we talk about this now, because obviously we're about to have an election in this country and what have you.
It's very true. On American Independence Day.
No,
not that it makes any difference, but it's just weird to know.
It doesn't feel like it does. I'm sure people probably think, it's Independence Day, so yeah, we're going to get the Labour government back. Everything's going to be fine.
I imagine something will come up, but anyway, that's just me being weird.
But let's call it a day, but maybe let's bring this round. So all of these various threads that we've ended up talking about, how is it that those things are going to give our life spiritual meaning?
Well, what I take from this is the method that I kind of spoke about a bit ago, which is we need to recognize that things are complex and your thoughts are your thoughts and not truths. And so when we are quick to judge and quick to say that person's an asshole, that group's horrible, you're wrong if you like these people, you're only right if you like these people. And that's the thing, it's about seeing it on the people you like as well and realizing that they're complicated, and actually there's sides to the people you like that aren't great, and yet you accept it for the people you like, or you ignore it and you don't for the people you don't like. In fact, you ignore their good parts. So it's something about realizing that everyone's made of the same stuff, everyone's complicated. I know that people are assholes because I can be an asshole. I know that people can be good because I think I have good qualities. We know it in ourselves, yet we expect perfection or absolute shit from other people, and you can only be one or the other from other people. But yet we know it in ourselves that that's not true, and we're not special. Everyone is like us. Whatever crappy feelings you have, everyone else has them. Whatever good feelings you have, everyone else has them. So the person you hate feels the same way you do, probably, for the most part. We're made of the same stuff. Where they're not, flesh, bash your flesh. But also where people are different, think about the reasons. Be interested in people, or if you're not going to be interested in them, then don't have a thought about them. Don't judge them. We're not meant to judge people, but the only reason we have thoughts about people is because we judge them. But don't, I don't like telling people don't, but like, try and think around it. Think, well, how was that person brought up? If I was brought up by a psychopath dad, to be a psychopath and to always be expected to be good, then goodness knows I'm probably going to be a psychopath. The Thich Nhat Hanh, I've definitely got that wrong, but he's a Buddhist writer. He's one of the more famous ones. Wrote about going to prisons, and he used to go into prisons and speak to all the prisoners there who've done awful, awful things, and he could always do it with compassion and interest, because he's like, how do I know if I wasn't brought up the same way they were brought up that I wouldn't do those things? And it's just about recognizing the complexities of people and the complexities of groups and the complexities of a situation, that when we get angry about it and when we make judgments, we're getting angry because of the thoughts and the judgments we've attached, and we haven't actually looked into what is really there. And what's really there is a person that's made the same as you, brought up in different ways that made them completely weird and wonderful, but yet still has similar thoughts to you probably. And just trying, it's really hard, but trying to remember that in a moment when you get annoyed with something, because it's you that's annoyed, not the person doing it to you. No one's doing anything to you. You're just getting annoyed because you've decided you think something. So yeah, that's how I try and navigate that. It's so like holier than thou to say, and my goodness, I don't do it all the time. I barely do it. I mean, that's why people practice things like meditation and practice things like contemplation, to try and be able to do this in the moment. And I don't think there's anyone that can actually successfully do it other than monks that remove themselves from society so they don't really have to. But it's just trying to catch yourself having those thoughts and just question them internally and actually out loud. Like, I think, talk about it with people, because recently I've been talking to people who I just assumed one thing, like think one thing and used to say only one thing. And actually when you have conversations with people to some level, you find that they are able to conceptualize the fact that people are really complex, and we need to remind each other of it as often as we can, I think, where appropriate. I mean, don't be that annoying person that talks about it all the time like we are. No, but yeah, long-winded way of going around it, but people are complicated, things are complex.
Not long-winded at all. I think that was very wise. I don't really have anything much to add, to be honest. I think the only other thing that I could add, possibly, which is exactly more or less the same, but maybe just seen from a slightly different point of view, is that those aspects of nuance which exist within people and within groups and within events and within our society as a whole, enjoy them. Those are the interesting things about life.
Yeah.
It's not interesting to have a conversation with someone who agrees 100% with you. In fact, it's way more interesting to have a conversation with someone who you can be perfectly polite and nice to, but who maybe comes from a different perspective and can open your mind to other things.
100%.
And going back to, that discussion of reading, that's one of the beauties of reading, is that you can pick things sometimes which go against your view. Mm-hmm. They might even come from someone who's completely at the opposite end of, we're not only talking about politics either, it's just anything, like someone who just has a completely different point of view from you, or the guy in the concentration camp. I'm not saying we have maybe similar views, you could argue, but he's from a completely different place in time, a completely different place in society, culture, everything. There's no similarities between me and him, really, except, of course, there's fucking shitloads of similarities between me and him. And there was loads of stuff that I read in there that I was like, I totally agree with you on this, that and the other. So I think it's about enjoying that. It's not just about gritting your teeth and saying, I'm going to be really, I'm going to think about my Buddhist teachings, and I'm going to engage with this person in a way that is kind. Yes, that's really important, and fucking hell do we ever need kindness more than anything else in the world at the moment. Towards everybody, by the way, I mean, not just towards sort of people who you can relate to. But it makes your life a million times more interesting. It makes life better. It makes your brain grow. It makes your soul grow. And it fills that God-shaped hole in your heart with something positive.
I like it. I have one practical thing as well. It's not very exciting, but it's just something we've done in the last 2 weeks, and it's probably something I should have mentioned at the beginning, is something that has made us spiritually more whole. And I'm not trying to be holier than thou. I just mean this is something we've figured out to do, and I think everyone, if you can remember to do it. It's really boring, but it's about leaving reviews, and I'm really sad. But I've done it loads this week, and it's so good, and you should fucking do it. It's when we were in a gosh, where were we? We were in Margate. We were in some little Greek Slovakia place, and the people working there are trying real hard, and they're getting crapped on by some of these Bryan Adams fans, being absolutely shat on. And it's not their fault. The people who are speaking to them are being really difficult. And again, there's a vision in their world. Maybe they're all on a girls' night out and they want everything to be perfect. And they've stumbled across a restaurant. It's not really a restaurant. It's just a glorified kebab shop. So they're all probably a little bit sad, drinking their wine out of cans, getting angry that things aren't going to turn up on a plate. I don't know. But I just felt dreadful for them. We ordered our food. We had no problem. We got our food. It was delicious. Write the review there and then. Don't leave and say, oh, we should be nice to that person. Because people are always quick to remember to write a bad thing or to be horrible about people. But if you want to do a nice thing, you want to say a nice thing, do it right there and then.
What Siobhan's trying to say is, please do write a review of this podcast.
No! Don't do that, because I actually don't ever want to hear what anyone ever thinks of this.
I don't know where you would, but feel free to.
No. Just share it in a private email, please. But, yeah, I just think if you want to say a nice thing, it's a bit like when I want to say a nice thing to that person at work, just trying to find a way to do it. Again, I've done it a pathetic way by an email to their supervisor, but share, do nice things. It does wonders for your brain and wonders for you. Like you just said brain and soul, didn't you? I'm clearly going to steal it. But like saying nice things and being nice for the sake of just being nice.
Well, pretending to be a nice person makes you a nice person.
There you go.
I think that maybe that's what we'll talk about next episode, because I think you just brought up a really huge point that we now can't talk about because we've spent the whole time talking about
oh goodness knows, evil people and then politics
things.
And then God knows around the houses.
So we will leave it there. If you want to get in contact for any reason, shamcityroasters@gmail.com. You're very welcome to do whatever you want on social media, but we probably won't see it.
Yeah, we are going to change the thing on social media. So by the time this comes out, the Breakfast Punx bit will be gone, and we will be Sohbet Podcast.
Well, we think so. That's if we're allowed to do that. I don't know how to do that.
I'm going to try.
Yeah,
it'll be a very confused thing for a very long time.
And we are going to do this every 2 weeks, as usual, every other Thursday, or as usual, we didn't do it for 9 months or whatever it was, but as usual again. So we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much for listening this far. Thank you very much for not being weeded out by last week's episode. Yes. Again, if this is your first time listening, it might be worth going back and listening to the last episode, even though it sounds like it's a completely different podcast. It's still us.
It's still us. It's always been us.
Talking nonsense, trying to explain exactly what it is that we're trying to explain.
Yeah.
And we're going to continue doing that for as long as it fucking takes. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Look after your God-shaped hole.
Goodbye.
Bye.